Stay in the ACC. Let's go from Tallahassee to North Carolina, the Tar Heels. And we're not talking about basketball, folks. We're talking about football. Will North Carolina bounce back this season? Because last year they had a lot of hype, a lot of high expectations. You had Sam Howell coming back. A lot of people had this team penciled in as their dark horse college football contender. And if you guys have been listening to the podcast for a while, you guys would know that I was one of the few people who pushed back against the North Carolina hype. And I actually came out and said that they were the most overrated team in college football when I did my UNC record prediction. I got a lot of hate from Tar Heel fans, but you know what's funny? When you're right, nobody ever comes back to apologize and say, you know what, JT Sports, you were right about my Tar Heels. Everybody just stays silent. But if North Carolina would end up being as good as what many people expected them to be, everybody would have came back and saying, oh, this ain't aged well, or, oh, you were wrong. You get what I'm saying? It would have been a lot of noise. People would have been at my neck. But it's okay, North Carolina fans. You don't have to apologize. You're listening to this podcast and this segment, so that's enough for me. So, Mack Brown enters year 4 with this program. And they went 6-7 last year. And things were really ugly. Really ugly. I mean, Sam Howell in his last year was running for his life. I mean, he had to kind of carry the load in a sense on offense. I mean, it was just a complete mess on the defensive side of the football. It was one of the worst defenses that I've seen in a very long time from North Carolina under Mack Brown. And it's funny because the defense was supposed to be the strong point of North Carolina last season. So there are a lot of questions about North Carolina that many people have going into this season. Now, their over-under win total is at 7.5. So Vegas thinks that they're going to be able to bounce back. Who's going to end up replacing Sam Howell? Is it going to be Jacoby Criswell or Drake May? We don't really know. It's to be decided. Then who's going to emerge behind Josh Downs? Who's going to be their second wide receiver? It looks as if Antoine Green is going to end up filling that second wide receiver role. He had 31 receptions for 612 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns last season. Now, you do have a couple of talented guys who you received from the 2021 recruiting cycle, such as Kobe Paysauer or Paysor. You do have J.J. Jones, who is really big physical wide receiver. He's 6'2", 210 pounds. He has a powerful frame. He's really good at making contested catches. He has good body control, decent athleticism to make some things happen after the catch. Gavin Blackwell, 4-star, out of that same recruiting cycle. So there definitely is some good talent there that should be able to have a big impact in this passing game. I'm really excited about Gavin Blackwell. He's 5'11", 175 pounds. He isn't the biggest guy, but this dude has some pretty good route running technique in his game. I'm really excited about how good he is when it comes to being able to get off the line, great separation. He has really good body control. He's really fluent with his motion when it comes to running routes. I just like everything about his game. I'm hoping that he gets some opportunities this year to show what he can do. At tight end, you're pretty set there. I definitely think that the tight end position potentially could end up being a big focal point in this offense if the wide receiver position kind of struggles. Your offensive line, you don't really know, because this was a unit that struggled in pass protection last season. Plus, they also lost a few starters as well. So you're bringing in a couple of transfers. You have some upperclassmen as well, but you don't really know. So fingers crossed if you are a Tar Heels fan that you get pretty good offensive line play. Running back is probably one of the positions on this team that you look at and you don't have any concerns about. They're really loaded at running back. They have 3, 4, 5 guys who are all good enough to start. So the main 2 guys are probably going to be British Brooks and DJ Jones. Brooks last season, 31 carries for 295 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's going to probably end up being the lead back this year. DJ Jones is probably going to end up being behind him. And North Carolina normally runs at least 2 or 3 running backs in their rotation yearly. So we're probably going to see UNC have a pretty solid run game. And they're probably going to lean on that run game a lot, simply for the fact that you have so much unknown when it comes to how good the pass blocking is going to be from your offensive line. So look for the run game to be really vocal in this offense. And plus, on the defensive side of the football, right? I mean, it was just a complete disaster. And if you're a Tar Heels fan, you're probably saying, you know, the defense can't get no worse than what it was last year. It was, I don't even know how to describe it, man. But, I mean, one of the only bright areas that you had was that you were really good at getting pressure on the quarterback. You were in the middle of the pack in that department. But everything else, terrible. So you bring in Gene Chizik as your defensive coordinator. And one thing that he has been emphasizing a lot over the course of this offseason has been that he wants to force more turnovers. He wants this defense to be better at giving the offense more possessions. And last year, North Carolina was 86 in takeaways per game. You look at the defensive line, they have a good amount of talent here. I mean, they got good depth as well. Look at Myles Murphy. He had 4 sacks. You also have a pretty good group of linebackers. Noah Taylor, who is a transfer from the University of Virginia. You're going to be pairing him alongside of Cedric Gray, who probably was your only bright spot on defense last year when it came to your front seven. So you got to be feeling pretty good about where your front seven is at this time. It's probably something that you have the most confidence about. When you get into the secondary, that's where a lot of questions are going to lie. Tony Grimes, I definitely think that he's probably the best cornerback that they have. But who else is going to be lining up on the opposite side of him? You don't really know. Cameron Kelly led the team in interceptions last year with 4. So you have 2 guys in your secondary who you can rely on to be dependable. But after that, you don't really know. So this is a North Carolina team that is really shaky. And I got to ask you guys, do you feel that this program kind of peaked? Did this program see their highest moment under Mac Brown the season prior to 2021? Because this is a team that, yes, they do have a good amount of talent, and they have recruited at a pretty solid level. So you're expecting everybody to come in and be able to produce, but as we already know, not everybody pans out that way. And there are a lot of question marks. You don't really have a lot of proven productivity at certain areas. So looking at their schedule, the good thing is that your out of conference is pretty easy. You play Florida A&M, that's a W. You got Appalachian State on the road there, but that probably won't be a guaranteed win, but you definitely should be favored to win that matchup. I think that Carolina should be able to win that game, even though Appalachian State is going to be pretty solid this year. I think they should be able to pull that one off. Then you play Georgia State on the road at Georgia State. So you should be able to go 3-0 before you play Notre Dame. And the good thing about your next couple of games, Notre Dame and Virginia Tech, is that you play both of those 2 teams coming off a bye, and you play them at home. Notre Dame, you're playing them coming off that bye, and it's going to be at home. Then you play Virginia Tech. So that Virginia Tech game probably could go either way. So you could go into that game against Miami, maybe 5-0, 4-1 at the bare minimum. So you're going to be in a pretty good spot there. Now, Miami is going to be a really tough team this year. As a matter of fact, they probably could end up being the best team in the Coastal Division this year. So you play Duke. Duke is probably going to be one of, if not the worst team in the ACC this year. So that's the win. So at this point, you're only having, 1 or maybe 2 losses. Then that's where things really start to pick up, because then you play Pitt, coming off a fantastic season. Then you got to play Virginia, which Virginia may not be all that great, but you do play Wake Forest, Georgia Tech, and NC State to close out the year. So for North Carolina, I definitely could see them winning 7 games. I'm going to go with 8 wins. And the reason why I say they're going to win 8 games this year is because their out of conference really saves them. They don't really have anybody who I feel should give them that much trouble outside of Appalachian State. And both Appalachian State and Georgia State are going to be pretty solid this year. But I think that North Carolina should be able to take care of them. So it's good that you go into conference play with a good opportunity to be 3-0. And I also think that you maybe could only have maybe one loss going into that Miami game. And maybe you could beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame isn't a team that we're all too in the green about also. They also have a couple of question marks as well, with Marcus Freeman going into his first year as the head coach there. So I think that North Carolina should be able to win 8 games. I think they're going to be able to bounce back. I think that Mack Brown still is one of the best coaches in this conference. Even though North Carolina suffered from a down year, I still think that this is a program that has a lot of potential. I wasn't surprised that North Carolina had the season that they had. They're not Alabama, Georgia, or Ohio State where they can just lose that much talent and just simply just bounce back the next year and pick up from where they left off, or if not, be even better. I definitely think that this is a program that they're going to have some years that they peak, and then after that, they're going to kind of have some down years after, and then they're going to bounce back until they really start to build themselves up and keep on recruiting at a very high level, and they start to bring in top 10 recruiting classes consistently. So it was expected, at least in my opinion, for UNC to have a down year. And I also think that they kind of fell into the media hype train, because when you start to read so much good headlines about yourself, you know, it kind of does affect the psyche of a team. It actually is a real thing. People think that's just nonsense that people stew, but it actually is a real thing. Complacency is also something that could dethrone a lot of people's potential success in life. So for North Carolina, Mack Brown, he's looking at trying to get back to the basics. He's trying to get this program back to what they were before they had the season that they had in 2021. I don't really have any concerns about the offense. I think that they should be able to get things figured out on defense. At least from a front seven perspective, you should be pretty straight in that department, but we don't really know how good the secondary play is going to be outside of 2 good players. So let me know how you guys are feeling about the University of North Carolina going into the 2022 college football season down in the comment section down below.